All of you. It is 4 o'clock. We are going to go ahead and begin and call our district calendar committee meeting to order. So welcome to all of you again. Appreciate having you here and having you come back to join us for week 2 of our work. I will continue through the course of our meeting today to admit some others that are joining us into the room. I know it starts you off in the lobby, so I'll be pulling some of our other members in as we kind of go through these first couple minutes here. I know we have at least one member who was unable to join us last week that does plan to join us today. So once again, thank you and happy Wednesday to you all. A couple of quick housekeeping reminders before we move forward. A reminder not to use that chat feature today if you could. It just adds an extra step for us when we post and share this meeting with our community. So if you would, if you do have a question or you are going to contribute to one of our discussion items, up at the top bar, you see the big red leave button. Don't press that, but a few buttons over from it, you'll see a hand icon. You can always click on that hand and that will let me know that you have something to say to that item. After you are through speaking, it is helpful if you go back in and take your hand down. So your hand will be raised at that point, and if you can go ahead and remove your hand from being raised after you are done talking, that would be great. One more last reminder, you all were awesome with this last week, but if you would just keep your mic muted at all times unless you are speaking, that will also help move us along. So once again, thank you. We are going to move on to agenda item number 3. Hopefully you received the minutes from our last meeting, September 30th meeting minutes. Wondering if there is anybody who would like to make a motion to approve those minutes or if there are any changes or revisions that need to be made. And please feel free to raise your hand if you would like to make any changes or revisions, or if you would like to make a motion. I see Ray's hand up. Ray, go right ahead, please.
I'd like to move to accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you very much. We have a motion to accept the minutes as presented. Mrs. Millerani.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, if you would unmute and say aye.
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 And any opposed, if you would unmute and say nay. Hearing none, we will move on to agenda item number 4, review and discuss proposed 2021 and 2022 calendar. This was also included for you, and I can pull it up for you here for the sake of our discussion once we get going through our discussion, but this is a follow-up item from our last meeting. We discussed the 2021-22 school calendar, and we had some questions regarding the number of days that are in the quarters as well as in the semester. So we were able to prepare a breakdown of that for you so that we could discuss, I believe the concern and the discussion was really around parent-teacher conferences. So the draft that you receive, we have gone ahead per the recommendation of this group and added the 2 days to parent-teacher conferences. I believe the particular discussion was relative to October 14th and 15th in the first semester, and the dates for those early release days for parent-teacher conferences. There was a question regarding moving those to October 7th and 8th, which would then make the end of the quarter October 1st. As it stands right now, the end of the quarter is October 8th. Wanted to just give a little bit of explanation after having some discussion with our academic services team. Ending the quarter on October 8th makes 43 days in the first quarter, 46 days then in the second quarter, so a total of 89 days in the first semester. When we talk about balancing quarters as much as possible, and again, it's not always, sometimes we have years where it's a little funny or a little bit more of a spread. But looking at the second semester, we have 43 days to end before spring break, which is a good thing, and then 48 days in that last quarter. But as academic services team pointed out for us, while that seems like a lot more than that 43 days in the third quarter, high school seniors get out a week earlier, so that helps with that little bit of a disparity, and they have classes that are only 9 weeks. So this disparity is okay for them, and they will have about 5 less days in that quarter. But after chatting with our academic services team, that is the information that they provided me to share with you. So semester 2 has 91 days. So I will pause there just for a quick second. Hopefully you all have that for reference. I will get it queued up here to load for you all in case anybody wants to look at it. So give me one moment to do that. In the meantime, while I'm getting that loaded up, Erin, I will ask you to look for any hands that might be raised that want to discuss, if you wouldn't mind calling on anyone that has their hand up that would like to discuss further.
No problem. Julie, go ahead.
Hi, so a question then. You said if it ends on October 8th, that first quarter would have 43 days, correct?
That's correct.
So if we move the end of the quarter to the 1st, then that makes it only 38?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's very low, the 38 days, in my opinion.
Any other discussion on wanting to make any proposed changes to that, or are we comfortable with where it's placed and looking at this calendar that now has the 2 days added on there? And thank you again for that, Mrs. Connolly. I believe that was your catch at our last meeting, so thank you for that. We've added the 2 days for parent-teacher conferences in October and in February, bringing us to 180 days total. And just another side note reminder for that, or for any community members who are streaming our meeting today and missed the last one, that we are funded based on 180 days. So that's why we do have 180 instructional days in our school calendar. Any other questions on that? Do we have consensus to move forward with the calendar as presented with these, with the parent-teacher conferences of the 14th and 15th of October and the 17th and 18th of February? Let me ask it this way. Any disagreement on moving forward as presented? Okay, hearing none. I will advance the 2021-22 calendar for ratification for the board. A reminder, they've already approved this calendar. They just need to ratify it. So we'll advance that for them to ratify at the November 15th meeting. I'm going to move on then to agenda item number 5, review and discuss the proposed 2020 school calendar survey. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for one moment so I can pull up what was sent to you. You were provided via email a copy of the last calendar survey, the questions that we asked, and then I did go ahead and add a question based on the feedback that you gave at our last meeting relative to some future calendar concepts that might need some additional study. So that's question number 5 in the draft that was provided to you. And I'm going to pull that up so you can see what we are discussing here. But I would maybe just make one additional note before we open it up to questions. Question 5 that was added reads, what components would you like to see future calendar committees study for consideration. I added modified year-round calendar model that is based on how we are currently funded with a 180 days of school. But what should be noted in there, and it's an error on my part, instead of 9 weeks on, 3 weeks off, it should say spread over the calendar year with extended breaks and a shorter summer. 9 weeks on and 3 weeks off is not accurate, as our research and data director shared with me. So that is a correction that would need to be made with extended breaks and a shorter summer for modified year-round. That next bullet point, year-round calendar, and that's an extended school year model. That's 200 days of instruction, and this does require the district to apply to the state to change our current instructional model. Making this type of a change is certainly possible. There are school districts that do it, although I can't name any that are in the Maricopa County area that are on such model, but this is likely a multi-year process, so just keep that in mind. It's probably unlikely that any of these changes that are part of this item that we'd ask for feedback would be possible to put into place and have approved by November 15th, which is our keeping us in alignment with policy for this year. And then a 4-day school week was added on there as well. Those would be extended school days to compensate for removing 1 day from each week. And then did add another category in case somebody had some type of an innovative or alternate model that they wanted to share with our committee. Again, just took a stab at this based on the feedback you all provided to me at the last meeting, but certainly open to feedback, suggestions, recommendations, or any other changes to the overall survey that you'd like to see. Mrs. Connolly.
Danielle, I have a question about the extended school year, just in case anybody in our community might be interested in that. Once we would apply to that, say that we got approval, that's obviously 20 more days of pay for staff. So if it's approved, does that mean that the state picks up that tab, or is that something that the district incurs in terms of fees?
That's a really good question. Thank you for asking. And I had an opportunity to touch base with Ms. Myers, our Chief Financial Officer, and the response that she gave me, and I believe it comes from ARS 15901 and 15902.04, and those are the state statutes that govern the school calendar. So she's provided kind of a snippet of that to me. And basically what this means, you know, we're funded as a school district on something called our ADM. That is our average daily membership. So that's our average enrollment of students, part-time students and full-time students, minus any withdrawals. If that sounds complicated, it's school finance for you. I believe it's designed that way, maybe on purpose, but so ARS 15902 provides the option for a 200-day calendar, and we would receive an additional 5% of our base level funding. And so that's something to keep in mind. I don't believe that it adds all of the funding to cover those 200 days. So it provides an additional 5% of base level funding. So that is a consideration as you look at discussing or making any of those types of changes. Did that answer your question, Mrs. Connolly?
Yes, that does. I'm just wondering if that also needs to be included, not the whole explanation, but maybe just a little snippet that says this would cause a need for additional funding or something like that. I don't know.
Thank you. We can discuss that. And Ms. Queen, please go ahead.
So just a question, has there, I guess, been any statistical information, or do we have access to that on the pros and cons of going year round and doing either 188 days versus a 200-day mark on what the impact is to the student and the learning and the retention?
So that's a really great question as well. So the academic impact, I think, is what you are alluding to, the academic impact of extending our school calendar. The short answer to that is the state legislature, through the Arizona Revised Statutes, really leaves that up to individual school districts to set their own calendar. And so that's why this board has the right to call for a committee and discuss. It's based on doing, or it's designed to allow each school district to do what's best for their individual community and their district. We could certainly reach out to academic services and ask them to pull together information on such study, if that's something either that this committee would like to review, or if based on the feedback we get from our families, if we want to begin with that and determine if we want to further study that for future calendars. I think that would be a great thing to look into.
Thank you.
Any other feedback on, are there other questions we should be asking? Are these the right questions? Ms. Wall, go right ahead.
If I remember correctly, when we were on the calendar committee the last time it was convened, we had moved spring break from the second week of March to the third week of March, but I don't remember what the reasoning was behind that. Was it to do with when the quarter ended? Do you remember?
Yes, thank you. I'm glancing back at our 21-22 calendar, and we try, again, I think I say with a caveat for everything of depending on the year and when days fall, it's helpful if the quarter can end before spring break. And so sometimes that does just make that adjustment depending on when other holidays fall, of moving it either from the third week to the fourth week or from the second week to the third week. And so looking at the 21-22 calendar, it falls nicely for next year. If you look at that one, it falls right squarely in the middle of March, and it does make it so the quarter ends before spring break.
Okay, that makes sense. I was just wondering if that was something we wanted to survey parents on, but if it works best with the quarter, then maybe we don't need to.
Any other thoughts? You're just anxious to hear what they have to say. Ms. Holliday, go right ahead.
Hi, I just had a question about question 4 for the fall break. I don't know if we could explain a little just how, if we don't have the full week of Thanksgiving, that we would still have, whether it's Thursday and Friday or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, like other districts have that don't have a full week that particular week. And then is it possible if we picked the 3-day break in October to line that up with Columbus Day, and then it would actually be a 4-day break in October? I know other districts have that too.
That's a really good question. Was, could we indicate, and I'm thinking, and see if this captures what you're saying, where it says 3-day break in October, sort of like what we have in question 5, to put in parentheses, and still have the Thursday and Friday of Thanksgiving off. Would that address the first question?
Yes.
Or comment? Okay. Did you catch that, Erin? I'm checking. She's taking good notes for me.
I believe so. So for question 4, the first bullet item would stay the same as full week break. The week of Thanksgiving, the alternate would be 3-day break in October, but in parentheses, still have Thursday and Friday off for Thanksgiving, correct?
Yes. So to answer your second question, thank you, Erin. To answer your second question, Ms. Holliday, we could look to make that a 4-day break in October. What we might have to do is wait till we get the survey feedback and see if that is something our community is wanting us to look at. So when you look at the way we have the break right now, and I'm going to hope that that I'm explaining this correctly. If not, I'm sure one of you will jump in and correct me. The week of Thanksgiving that we take off, we're taking off the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th next year. That's 3 days. So it would be, if we were to move that to October, adding 3 days to October, that 4th day. So remember, I guess the summary would be, anytime you take an additional day off anywhere, you have to add that back in somewhere else. So typically that might mean you have to start a day earlier or go a day later. So it's more of, I guess, just the trade-off. So I guess the answer is yes-ish. We could look at that if that's something that our community is wanting. Would it be, well, let me pause there. Does that make sense, that explanation?
Yes.
Okay, anything's possible. It's all just the give and take to get to that 180 days. That's what I'm trying to say, and did so in a very roundabout way.
That makes sense.
Okay, very good. And then the other consideration for that week of October, we have had a calendar like that in the past where it aligned with Columbus Day, and we had an extra couple of days off there, is a reminder that you do have those parent-teacher conferences to fall somewhere within that month. So being mindful, you may end up with a couple of weeks back to back with 2 half days plus the full week off, and then a quarter ending. So it's more so just getting a lot of things in that month. But again, all possible. There are districts that do it. It's just, I'm trying to give you food for thought as we're looking at making all those different considerations. Anything is possible if it adds up to 180 days. And Ms. Copeland, did you have a question, or is your hand up from earlier?
No, I did have a question. So for question 5, I'm just trying to wrap my head around the 4-day school week at the extended school day. What is that going to look like in terms of hours for the kids? And if there's been any research as far as, are there any other districts that are doing 4-day school weeks? And if so, has there been any good feedback with that or bad feedback with that? And what that looks like for our students?
Sure, that's a really good question, and I can speak to that with some level of expertise. A few years ago, probably 5 years ago now or more, we did some really in-depth research as a school district on potentially moving to a 4-day week to look at that for some cost-saving measures of kind of saving on your facilities by running them 4 days instead of 5. Our research there, from just simply a cost savings perspective, ended up being pretty close to a wash. Because again, you are just pushing the wear and tear on your facilities harder during the week. And so I would be happy to bring some of that back to the team, some of the work that we did previously, or an example of another district that does have that 4-day week. Again, I don't know of any directly in Maricopa County. I know there are some rural districts that have a model similar to this. It tends to be school districts that have students that have a very long commute to get into work. So some of our communities where there is one school in the community and it might be in the center of, the center of town and a number of other towns, they're commuting in and, might be on a school bus for an hour getting to school. A lot of times they, only doing that 4 days and just making those longer days tend to be better for some of those families. So I know there are rural districts that have such a model. But again, I'd be happy to dust off some of that research and bring it back. I do recall through some of the surveys that we did when we were exploring that model, there were some people really passionate about pursuing a model like that. Those that, maybe some of our high school students that look to get, jobs and want to be able to work on that extra day off. But on the flip side, we had some families of younger parents that were concerned about having younger students, making those some really, really long days for those students, and then getting home and having to do homework and things, making that just a really long day. So I'll pause there and see if that answers your question, and see if you want me to bring back any of that further research, or even I can email that out to the team if that would be helpful.
Yes, absolutely, you answered the question, but I'm just wondering if it's not something that we potentially would be moving forward with? Is it something that we would need to include in that question 5 on the survey?
That's a really good point and thought. I'd turn it over to your fellow committee members. And I guess I'd say likewise with any of the things on the survey. I mean, that's what's open for your discussion today. You know, your comfort level on maybe, you know, exploring some of them, you know, reminding you that you're to represent your whole community. And if you see something on there that would be a challenge to actually move forward with, or for you to recommend to our governing board, please feel free to share that as well.
Thank you.
Mrs. Ceja Martinez, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I was just listening and to the last comment. I would agree with the circumstances in our current environment have changed. We definitely from year to year, but looking at when the original research on the 4-day schedule and how it may look like now and in the future is something I would like to see as a survey. Should we even continue looking at a 4-day option, especially with everything going forward could look a lot different. Everything's on the table in my perspective, and hearing the 4-day just as a survey question is not harmful. More information is better than less. So that's my thought on the 4-day thought process. The other question I would like to see is, does our community want to have the calendar committee consider any cultural or religious holidays observed within our calendar? If it's yes, which one? If no, then we move right on.
And I do have that feedback from our diversity and inclusion committee as well. And so they've kind of gone through and highlighted 2020 diversity holidays and gone through and kind of given their recommendations of particular holidays or observances that they would like to see us recognize kind of publicly as a school district. And that might mean sharing what our students do to celebrate some of those days or to learn about those days, highlighting them on the calendar that's on our school district's website, as well as maybe through some of our social media channels. The ones that are included on the calendar that the board approves are simply those from a federal perspective that we're kind of required to list. And I'm open to further consideration. The holidays that the Diversity Inclusion Committee gave me is probably a 7-point font.
Correct.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, you've seen it, Mrs. Ceja Martinez. I forgot. It's a lot of pages long. And so it's one of those where if you list one holiday, you typically have to list all of them, and maybe some concern on getting it all on a governing board approved calendar, as opposed to just making sure we're highlighting those year round.
Definitely. I thank you for providing that document to the diversity committee. And so what I'm thinking is separate. So you've highlighted a way to bring attention to, but not in essence, observable calendar holiday. So just asking the community yes or no, and then if so, what? And again, it goes back to more information is better than not enough. And it helps with information that can feed back to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee as well going forward as they plan their year. I don't want to see a calendar bombarded with information so that parents get confused. Is today a day off or not a day off? And which is a different calendar if we're just celebrating and highlighting and bringing attention to. What I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, the calendar that we're looking at, though, is actually in person or days off from that perspective. Is that accurate?
That's right. You're approving the start, the end, the breaks, and then we do just list those federal holidays where we have no school. not all of the holidays that exist. So you're absolutely right. And I love getting some feedback on that from our community, because that's not something that we've done before. And maybe I can follow up with the Diversity Inclusion Committee to talk about what plans they have to get some feedback for their own work, to make sure we're not stepping on their toes and that we're also not confusing our community on this survey, that we're looking to take any of those particular days off. It's not related to the work of this committee. So I just don't want to confuse them, but I love we need to get that feedback from our community 100%. So I can follow up with Dr. Davidson, who leads that Diversity Inclusion Committee, and see where that best fits, if that would work.
Definitely. Yes, we attended the meeting. I think it was yesterday. Time flies. And so they were tasked with.
Oh, I think we may have lost you, Mrs. Ceja Martinez.
Hmm?
Oh, there you are.
I lost you. They were tasked with reviewing the packet, and they were going to get to him by next week, and then a committee member was going to share it. I was just thinking in regards to the survey, because it's going to go out sooner than later, the 4-day and then any observable holidays to consider. It's not to say that we would, it's just to consider. And that's it.
Thank you. Any other feedback on this survey, Ms. Queen?
So yeah, I'm just adding to that. I mean, we talked about the year-round school, whether it be 180 days or 200 days, and I think it would be interesting to find out, particularly any studies or impact on the academic foundation for students if it was a 4-day work week, or excuse me, not work week, a 4-day school week for students, and what that impact would look like for them long term. I think that would be interesting. I think the community would be interested to know that information as well.
Thank you. We can absolutely gather that for you, and I can either email that to you, some of that out to you, or we can discuss that at our next meeting, maybe once we have the results. I'm not sure that I would have all that to include with the survey. If that meets, if you're comfortable with that, in order for us to get this out on Friday, I don't know that we'd be able to attach that to this survey. Would that be okay, or were you wanting to have it attached to the survey?
No, I think that if we just have that information so that we can communicate it if it's asked, I think that would be really good.
Great. We can absolutely do that. We'll follow up on that.
Thank you again.
Sure. Well, I'll pause for one more moment in case anybody has any other questions relative to what they'd like to see on the survey. All right. Well, we will send this over to get that updated for us. There will be an English and a Spanish version that we are targeting to get out to our community on Friday. We would keep the survey open for a week. That would then allow us to close it, look at all that data and get it formatted and out to you for our next meeting that's scheduled for Wednesday, the 21st. So that is our tentative timeline with that, to gather that feedback. And we will move on then to agenda item number 6, discussion on goals for our next meeting. And wanted to just check in again. We discussed this briefly when we talked about expectations during our first meeting, but the goal then for our next meeting would be to obviously the big agenda items, to review all that survey data, ask questions relative to that, and have hopefully some really good discussion around that. If you would like, I can be prepared to bring to that meeting some mock calendars that coincides with the data, with the survey we receive, with the information we receive. That way, as you're reading through the survey data, you have an example of something to look at to say, no, change this, tweak this, how about this, for the sake of discussion. Is that something you would like to see? Mrs. Connolly.
No, I was just raising my hand to say yes. That would be something I would like to see.
Mrs. Wall
Same for me. I'd like to see that as well.
and Ms. Queen.
Same. I think it would be great to see that as well.
Okay. Any other pieces of, I see lots of hands going up. How about anybody that has an alternative suggestion? How about that? Okay. Any other goals for the next meeting that you would see other than being able to look at the survey, look at the samples, and maybe come to some consensus potentially on what we might want to present to the board? And of course, at that time, if the data brings back anything that you see as concerning or something that needs to shift our path, we can do that and have that discussion on the 21st as well. Any other requests for future agenda items other than, and Erin, I will have you double check my work here, but that we want to be able to at least discuss and review relative to the feedback we get on components for future study, but in particular, the academic impact of some of those alternative options that we listed in question 5. Also, I will report out after discussing with Dr. Davidson how we might best gather community feedback on holidays and observances. Erin, did you have anything that I may have missed?
Those were the same 2 that I tracked in my notes.
Thank you. Okay. Any other requests for future agenda items? This is a very efficient group. I'm looking at the clock going, it's 4:36. You sure? We will be respectful of your time today and let you get on with your Wednesday. I will also note that, you know, as you get on with your evening today, or as we move to adjournment, if you did not have on your calendar to watch our ballot breakdown that's happening this evening, talking about all things related to elections and the impact on our community, that's happening tonight. Of course, there's the vice presidential debate as well, so you can choose to record that if you want and tune into our ballot breakdown, or the ballot breakdown is available on demand, so you can watch the vice presidential debate and check out our ballot breakdown later. So did want to just make sure to share that with all of you, and of course that's on our Peoria Unified website. I will move to adjournment then. Would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn? Ms. Queen?
A motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second? Ms. Copeland?
I second it.
Thank you. If you can unmute and share aye.
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 Thank you. And if you would mute again, and any opposed? Motion carries, and we adjourn at 4:37 p.m. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you, you too.